Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Under the Influence. And tonight we'll be watching the Gateway Process. This is CIA classified documents that were released a few years ago. I'm not really sure when, but it was recently released. And it showed that the CIA conducted a lot of psych experiments on the mind. They were trying to understand how powerful the mind is by using psychedelic drugs, seeing the effects of that, seeing what meditation does. They were trying to, they weren't saying what they were using it for, but they were just trying to tap into what powers that the mind actually has and what can do. There was a movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats that is a little insight to this CIA program that was going on. And I can't really explain too much about it. I'm still learning about it, but we're going to take a look at it. So let's go.
This is one of the most interesting reads I've come across. It's rather complex and takes a while to digest, but it's 100% worth it. It's an official declassified CIA document and a terrific analysis of consciousness and beyond, known as the Gateway Process. While it's an older document and has been declassified for a while now, the fact that modern developments in science, quantum physics, psychedelics, and neurobiology confirm what's written within those pages is nothing short of outstanding. It explains consciousness in a profound and analytical way and merges knowledge from mystics from Hindu, Buddhist, and Tibetan cultures to contemporary scientific knowledge of Planck distance, Einstein's theory of relativity, and the works of Niels Bohr. The cosmic spiral and torus is everything, and everything is one. It seems as though individual consciousness is pulled from the collective consciousness using the frequency vibrations of the being. This applies to humans, whales, fungus, and amoeba. Mystics of past and present, including all ancient religions, understood these concepts thousands of years ago. Still, it takes much to open the minds of the most pragmatic, self-conscious, and uptight people. 11. Consciousness and energy. Before our explanation can proceed any further, it is essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises the function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which that consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world in which we have our physical existence, in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms, matter and energy, tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know it. Indeed, if the term matter is taken to mean solid substance as opposed to energy, which is understood to mean a force of some sort, then the use of the former is entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids, which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. In his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Itzhak Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid, which composes the nucleus of the atom, vibrates at approximately 1022 Hz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 1015 Hz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 109 Hz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 103 Hz. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. The so-called states of matter are actually variances in the state of energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph. 12. Holograms. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using an example cited by Bentov, in which he asks the reader to visualize a bowl full of water into which 3 pebbles are dropped. As the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward towards the rim of the bowl, Bentov further asks the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen, so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantly. The ice is removed, leaving the 3 pebbles still laying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful, coherent source of light, such as a laser. The result will be a 3-dimensional model or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in midair. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific
That was a bit confusing.
has only been known to physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Denis Gabor in 1947. He later won a Nobel Prize for his work. Laboratory demonstration of Gabor's work only occurred years later following the invention of the laser, as biologist Lyle Watson explains. The purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency, like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond. When 2 laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off an object such as a human face, the resulting pattern will be very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The record will be a hologram of the face. 13. The part
That's confusing.
encodes the whole. Of further importance is the fact that even if we dropped our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and broke it into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. The smaller the piece, the fuzzier and more distorted would be the resulting holographic projection. But the fact remains that a whole projection would nonetheless be made. The key to creating any hologram is that the energy in motion must interact with energy in a state of rest, or non-motion. In the foregoing example, the pebbles represent energy in motion, while the water, before its agitation by the pebbles, represents the energy at a state of rest. To activate, or in effect, to perceive the meaning of a holograph, energy, in this case a coherent light source such as a laser beam, must be passed through the interference pattern generated by the interaction between the moving energy and the energy at rest. In the simple example given by Bentov, this requirement was fulfilled by holding the frozen interference pattern in front of the coherent light to project the 3-dimensional holographic image, its meaning, into space. As Marilyn Ferguson, editor of the Brain Mind Bulletin, tells us, another feature of a hologram is its efficiency. Billions of bits of information can be stored in a tiny space. The pattern of the holographic photograph is stored everywhere on the plate. 14. The consciousness matrix. The universe is composed of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is, in and of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. According to the theories of Karl Pribram, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we call consciousness. With respect to states of expanded or altered consciousness, such as gateway uses, the process operates in the following way. As energy passes through various aspects of the universal hologram and is perceived by the electrostatic fields which comprise the human mind, the holographic images being conveyed are projected upon those electrostatic fields of the mind and are perceived or understood to the extent that the electrostatic field is operating at a frequency and amplitude that can harmonize with and therefore read the energy carrier wave pattern passing through it. Changes in the frequency and amplitude of the electrostatic field, which comprises the human mind, determine the configuration and hence the character of the holographic energy matrix, which the mind projects to intercept meaning directly from the holographic transmissions of the universe. Then, to make sense of what the holographic image is saying to it, the mind proceeds to compare the image just received with itself. Specifically, it does this by comparing the image received with that part of its own hologram, which constitutes memory. By registering differences in geometric form and in energy frequency, the consciousness perceives. As psychologist Keith Floyd puts it,
That's confusing.
contrary to what everyone knows is so. It may not be the brain that produces consciousness, but rather consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. 15. Brain in phase. The consciousness process is most easily envisaged if we picture the holographic input with a three-dimensional grid system superimposed over it, such that all of the energy patterns contained within can be described in terms of three-dimensional geometry using mathematics to reduce the data to the two-dimensional form. Bentov states that scientists suspect that the human mind operates on a simple binary go, no-go system, as do all digital computers. Therefore, once it superimposes a three-dimensional matrix over holographic information it wishes to interpret, and reduces that information mathematically to two-dimensional form, it can completely process it using its fundamental binary system, just as any computer made by the hand of man can process volumes of data, and make various comparisons between the data and information stored in its digital memory. Our minds operate in the same way, perceiving by comparison only. Bentov states the proposition this way: our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive differences only. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain, in its holistic, nonlinear, and nonverbal mode of functioning, acts as the primary matrix or receptor for this holographic input, while, by operating in phase or coherence with the right brain, the left hemisphere provides the secondary matrix through its binary, computer-like method of functioning to screen further the data by comparison and reduce it to a discrete, two-dimensional form. 16. Evaluation. To the extent that Gateway succeeds in bringing about a refinement in the energy matrix of the mind, it succeeds in expanding or altering human consciousness so that it can perceive without recourse to the intercession of the physical senses, such that ever more of the universal hologram, not, of course, accessible by sense perception, can ultimately be perceived and understood. Marilyn Ferguson has written that the theories of Pribram and Bohm appear to account for all transcendental experience, paranormal events, and even normal perceptual oddities. She goes on to say of Pribram, currently he is proposing a startling, all-encompassing model that is generating considerable excitement among those intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness.
Okay, well, that was a bit confusing, so I'm going to switch it up to this other one. This is, I forget his name, but he does pretty cool videos, and he's pretty informative, and he's pretty good at explaining things. So hopefully he will give us some better insight on the gateway process.
My brain bucket, it's gonna fill up fast.
It is. You better have a spare bucket handy. The Gateway process is a training system developed in the 70s by the Monroe Institute in Virginia. Colonel McDonnell, along with other military personnel, went through the week-long training process that anyone can do, even today. But the Gateway report ended with a final warning that nobody really expected. Because this method is accessible to anyone, Colonel McDonnell warned that the military should be prepared for encounters with intelligent and non-friendly entities that could exist outside the boundaries of time and space. In other words, a psychic war.
Okay.
Even though anyone can learn the Gateway method, you can't just snap your fingers and escape reality. There is some foundation work you have to do first.
Well, no matter what reality you're in, ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Right. You have to learn relaxation techniques, meditation, and extreme focus. You also have to set all doubt aside and let your mind be open to a completely new way of thinking. Only once you master these techniques can you begin to comprehend the true nature of reality. Your life, the Earth, the universe, and everything in it is an illusion created by your mind.
Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds.
There is no solid matter. Everything that exists is a form of energy vibrating at extremely fast frequencies, from the largest objects in the universe down to atoms and subatomic particles and everything in between. It's
That's
all
quantum
energy.
physics.
The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all, is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. So-called states of matter are actually variances in energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy.
Our consciousness is tuned into the frequencies of energy that make up the world that we see. But we only perceive a small percentage of the energy that actually exists all around us. Think of tuning a radio. If you tune into a rock station, you only hear music broadcast on that channel. Now, of course, there are lots of other channels with all different kinds of music, but your radio doesn't play them all at once, only the single station it's tuned into. Our brains are like that radio, designed to filter out everything except for the energy that creates our reality. And just like a radio converts energy into sound, our brains convert this universal energy into things we can see and hear and taste and touch. But none of the solid matter around us is actually there. Our senses create the illusion of matter so that we can experience this reality in a way that we can understand. Now, according to the Gateway Report, we're all living in a shared universal hologram.
The universe is composed of interacting energy fields. It is in and of itself one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. According to the theories of Carl Pribram, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram, which attunes itself to the universal hologram and achieves the state, which we call consciousness.
The gateway process teaches you to turn off the filter in your brain and gives you access to alternate states of reality and lets you escape space-time altogether. And anyone can learn to do this. You don't need to decalcify your pineal gland or spend years at a Buddhist monastery. You don't need a shaman or a guru or mind-altering drugs. You just need headphones. The gateway process is done by listening to sound.
Yeah, but tell me more about those mind-altering drugs.
In the 1950s, New York broadcasting executive Robert Monroe found evidence that different types of sound could affect the human mind in different ways. Some sound patterns would make you sleepy. Another would make you alert. Some sound can give you anxiety. Other sounds are very relaxing.
Well, people have said my voice is relaxing.
Then you're not reading the comments. Using this discovery, Monroe began experimenting with hypnopedia, or sleep learning. Monroe was convinced that there was a connection between sound waves and not just a person's mood, but their ability to learn and retain information. Now, one night while trying a sleep learning technique, Monroe had an experience that was unexpected but would change his life. While listening to a specific sound frequency, his body slowly became paralyzed. He then started to feel a vibration that became stronger and stronger. Suddenly, he was awash in bright white light. Then a sound, or maybe just a sensation, of a rush of air that became a roar so loud it was unbearable. Then, in an instant, everything was quiet. The vibration stopped, the light dissipated, and Robert Monroe found himself in his bedroom floating above his sleeping body. There was no name for this at the time, but later became known as an OBE, an out-of-body experience, a term that Monroe himself popularized. Though this OBE happened completely by accident, he was able to use sound to replicate the experience 9 times over the next 6 weeks. Monroe wrote about the experience in his 1971 book, Journeys Out of the Body. He went on to found the Monroe Institute and became a prominent researcher in the field of human consciousness. Soon Monroe discovered that while out of his body, he could identify, access, and sustain different states of consciousness. This is done by synchronizing the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Now, even though the brain functions as a whole, its different parts serve different functions, as do its 2 hemispheres. The left hemisphere is traditionally associated with logic and reason, perception, and focus. The right hemisphere is responsible for emotion, creativity, and intuition.
So it's like a sideways mullet.
A sideways mullet? What are you talking about?
A mullet, you know, business in the front, but a party in the back. 2 pieces of your brain are like that. But a mullet is the front and the back, and the brain is left and right. So the mullet, it's sideways. I'm sorry, all this about dimensions and realities and mullets, it's hard to contribute.
The left hemisphere of the brain tends to be more active in the beta frequency range of 13 to 30 hertz, which is associated with alertness, attention, and cognitive control. The right hemisphere is active in the alpha frequency range, 8 to 13 hertz, which is associated with relaxation, creativity, and spatial processing. The right brain operates much more slowly than the left.
Sideways mullet.
By listening to certain sounds, the gateway process synchronizes both hemispheres using a technique called hemisync.
Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres, so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere, so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers.
The Gateway Report describes hemisync as a lamp versus a laser. The natural state of the human mind is like a lamp that emits light, but it's chaotic and messy and uneven over a large area. Hemisync lets the mind operate like a laser, producing a focused stream of energy. According to Gateway, when the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are brought into sync, it's possible to accelerate and raise the vibrational levels of the mind. As the mind resonates higher and higher, it can synchronize with the more complex energy levels in the universe. At these levels, the mind is capable of processing information in the same way it processes the energy of our current reality. In other words, you can see and feel and understand these other states of reality as easily as you understand this one. But you can do more than understand reality. You can learn to change it, control it, and bend it to your will, like Neo in the Matrix, or like God. According to Colonel McDonald's Gateway Report, understanding how human consciousness could exist outside the physical body requires an understanding of holographic theory, or the holographic principle.
Uh-oh, let me get my bucket ready.
Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram.
The report says that holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that if you made a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water, you could put the hologram, not the water, the hologram, under a microscope and see microscopic organisms, actually holograms of microscopic organisms. Now, this sounds nuts, but the CIA was onto something big. If you watched our episode on simulation theory, you'll remember John Wheeler and his delayed choice double slit experiment. The video has more details, but in short, Wheeler showed that particles seem to be able to change their state by going back in time. Now, Wheeler felt that the universe wasn't necessarily made up of matter and energy, but instead, the universe is made up of information. Our hologram uses this information to create our three-dimensional universe. And holographic theory is a well-established idea in theoretical physics and widely accepted by many physicists. I know it's a lot to wrap your head around, and I'd like to do a whole episode on this, so if you'd like to see that, email me or let me know in the comments. Anyway, in order to create our hologram from information, that information has to be exchanged. Particles can bounce off each other, can affect each other's speed, carry energy to each other, and that's how they exchange information. But here's where the Gateway Report goes a step further. It says that this information can be exchanged not just in our universe, but between dimensions, implying that there are dimensions of reality yet to be discovered. His theory raises questions about the interaction between human consciousness and the holographic universe. Like, can our consciousness, which is energy, also exchange information with other dimensions? The Gateway process says that yes, it can. But there's more. McDonald argues that human beings are not passive receivers of the information floating around the universe. We participate in this information. And by training the way we perceive and process the information that creates our reality, we can actually change reality itself. And this technique is called patterning.
The technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence reality if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity.
Think about the concept of The Secret and the law of attraction, which says that we can make things happen by focusing our imagination on a desirable outcome. But how? How do we allow our consciousness to access this other information? The Planck distance is about 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35 meters, so really small. It's the smallest possible unit of length that has any physical meaning in the universe. At this scale, the laws of physics break down. But what if it's not the smallest? In his report, Colonel McDonald speculates that by using the gateway process to accelerate brainwave frequencies, humans may be able to break the physical limitation of the Planck distance. McDonald suggests that consciousness could, for an instant, enter the space beyond human perception. He calls this clicking out of reality.
It is true that when, for an infinitesimally brief instant, that energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, it clicks out of time-space and joins infinity. That critical step out of time-space occurs when the speed of the oscillation drops below Planck's distance. To use the words of Bentov, quantum mechanics tell us that when distances go below Planck's distance, we enter, in effect, a new world.
So, I say we try it. Grab some headphones and let's see what's out there. Okay, don't worry, we're not really going to escape reality, at least not today. I just want to show you how the gateway process actually works. The program combines two techniques. The first is frequency following response, or FFR. FFR involves introducing a frequency through headphones, which the brain tries to mimic by adjusting its brainwaves. The second technique is beat frequency. You might have heard this called binaural beats. This involves playing different frequencies in each ear. The brain then chooses to hear the difference between them. For example, the sounds at 4 hertz are too low for you to hear. But if you listen to 100 hertz through the right ear and 104 hertz in the left ear, your brain can detect and hear the difference. In this case, 4 hertz. And here's how it sounds. This is the left ear. Listen how the tone is steady.
Okay, I'm with you.
Please don't talk during this part. We're trying to focus on the sound. Now, a steady tone in the right ear. We play them together, and you can hear the oscillation between the two frequencies, like a vibrato.
I hear it.
You're gonna blow out their ears.
Sorry. I get excited when I think I'm gonna travel to other dimensions.
Remember, your left brain is your logical and analytical side. Before information is processed by your right brain, which is the emotional and creative side, your left brain takes a look at the information. It filters it and tries to make sense of it before it accepts the information. But your right brain will happily absorb any information thrown at it. Psychologists like Ronald Stone say that hypnosis is a technique that relaxes or distracts the left brain so that outside stimuli have direct access to the intuitive, creative right brain. That's why people under hypnosis are so impressionable. Their left logical brain is disengaged, letting everything through. So if one of those wacky hypnotists gets you to cluck like a chicken, it's because your left brain isn't keeping tabs on the information coming through and your right brain says, cluck like a chicken, you got it.
Your right brain is always down to party.
It is. The gateway process relaxes the left brain through sound waves. When the brain is relaxed enough, the amplitude and frequency of brain waves can be pushed higher and higher, and the space between your brain waves gets smaller and smaller. And when the distance between your brain waves drops below Planck's distance, it clicks out of space-time.
Up to this point, our discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow.
Easy for you to say, sheesh.
Now the fun begins, as the almost continuous click-out pattern establishes itself in continuous phase at speeds below Planck's distance. But before reaching the state of total rest, human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice, beginning her journey into Wonderland.
But where is Wonderland? Well, everything is energy, right? Look at McDonald's drawing. This represents our brainwave or energy wave or consciousness, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same thing. The middle of the wave, where it spends most of its time, is our reality. But at the bottom and the top of the wave, in that brief moment, just before the wave changes directions, it isn't moving at all. It finishes going up, it stops, then goes down, stops very briefly, and then back up again. It's at that point where the wave changes direction that it clicks out of our reality and, according to the Gateway Report, joins infinity and the absolute.
Energy in this state of inactive infinity is termed by physicists as energy in its absolute state, or simply the absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe in which we experience our physical existence are various intervening dimensions to which human consciousness in altered states of being may gain access. Since the absolute is conscious energy in infinity, that is without boundaries, it occupies every dimension to include the time-space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it.
Look, I know it's not easy to follow.
No,
Think
it's
of it like
not.
this. The top layer is our reality. Everything that we can see and touch. That lays on top of these other dimensions, whatever they are. And all those dimensions and everything lays on top of this thing McDonald calls the absolute. The absolute is everywhere, but we can't see it. But everything happens inside it. So the absolute created our world. But who created the absolute? Well, isn't it obvious? You did. So the absolute. Let me try to keep it as simple as I can.
I'm gonna need a glass of Absolute after this episode.
Pour me one too, would you? The absolute is a conscious energy field at rest.
Ah, real simple.
No, it really is as simple as that. The absolute is an energy field that sits there doing nothing. But layered on top of that energy field is the energy field that makes up our reality. And in between those, other dimensions. But the absolute is us. We are the ones who created it and everything else. Not one of us, all of us. We're born into this reality with our own individual consciousness. We live out our time here on Earth, and then our consciousness returns to the absolute, where it came from. According to the Gateway Report, we return to this collective consciousness, but we also retain our individual identity. So, immortality in a way. Colonel McDonald sees the absolute as what many people might consider God.
The concept of visible reality, that is the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of Hebrew mystical philosophy. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute as presented in this paper.
McDonald also includes evidence of the absolute and the universal hologram in Eastern religions. He quotes Tibetan teachings and ancient Hindu texts. The Colonel then goes on to describe the nature of absolute itself and how it's come to self-awareness, how it relates to all belief systems and all religions, and how no matter what you believe, we're all the same.
In order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. The absolute is the actual agent of all creation, all reality. And the eternal thought or concept of self, which results from this self-consciousness, serves the...
What? What happened? Serves the what?
Well, that sentence is at the bottom of page 24. The document resumes on page 26 with a whole different topic, and then Colonel McDonald wraps things up.
So where's page 25?
C.I.A. says they don't have it.
They don't have the page that will unite the world, huh?
Nope, and they say they never did.
That's a bunch of bull.
For 18 years, people have been pressuring the CIA for the missing page. FOIA requests have been made, petitions have been created, all trying to get the CIA to release page 25. The CIA insisted they don't have it.
Sure they don't.
But in 2021, Vice published an article about the Gateway document and mentioned the controversy around the missing page. A few days later, the Monroe Institute released the complete report, including the mysterious page 25.
What's on it?
Well, I've linked to the complete document below, but the gist is this. McDonald says that no matter what religion or culture you're born into, the Gateway process could be a valuable tool, if not the most valuable tool ever designed, to help a person truly understand themselves and the nature of the universe itself. He says ancient mystics seem to understand the truth about the universe intuitively, and the Gateway process confirms this. Everyone on Earth is part of a collective consciousness, all placed here for the same purpose, to accumulate experiences, to learn from one another, and ultimately take that knowledge back to the energy for which we all came. He says that if we could become aware of this universal hologram, we could free ourselves from the prison of our individual lives and finally realize that at our most basic level, we're all the same.
In a military report?
Right. Colonel McDonald does eventually get back to the practical use of an out-of-body experience with respect to military strategy and intelligence gathering. But when I read his report, I feel like he gets back to business because he has to. Otherwise, this document reads like he believes in this process and believes it could really help people.
Interesting how this page was dropped by the CIA, huh?
Yeah, the message of peace and unity was conveniently absent from the CIA's file. Now, I don't know if that was an accident, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say it was. But accident or not, I agree it looks bad. McDonald ends his report by recommending the Army take specific steps in pursuing the Gateway process, but they should move in phases. He recommends that they use the Gateway tapes to learn how to synchronize their brains using hemisync, then learn to induce this state at will. And once trainees can do this, they should learn to achieve an out-of-body experience for remote viewing. He even gives some practical steps on how to verify the information being viewed is accurate. He encourages anyone learning the process to pursue self-knowledge and remove any personal prejudices that could be blocking their progress. The ultimate goal is patterning, that the military should learn to adjust reality for what he calls practical applications.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
It doesn't. When you read the Gateway Report, you get the sense that Colonel McDonald could be trusted with this knowledge, but the United States military, I don't know about that. Now, you could say the U.S. only uses its military power for national defense.
You'd be wrong, but you could still say it.
Either way, I don't think any military or any government could be trusted with the Gateway process. My hope is that as soldiers learn to access these different states of consciousness, they learn, as McDonald did, that the true nature of the universe is unity, not conflict.
You're quite the optimist.
Well, I try to be.
Well, here in the real world, optimists are always disappointed.
That's true, we are. So thank goodness, this isn't the real world. So what do you think about the Gateway process? Is it just New Age nonsense, or is there something to it? Are we just living in one aspect of reality, but with training and patience we could explore all of reality? And if you do believe there's something more out there that the Gateway process could make available to you, would you try it? Now, before you answer, you should know there are risks. Now, many students of the system have said they've accessed these higher planes of reality, and their lives were drastically improved. They report more self-awareness, more creativity, and greater clarity in their everyday lives. But some students have reported intense anxiety, depression, and in rare cases, psychosis. Whether you believe in the Gateway process or not,
Yeah, if you got
creating
trauma,
altered states of consciousness is
you have to be
absolutely
very
possible.
careful.
But when you do that, there is the potential to become detached from this reality. You could become untethered and lost, unable to find your way back. These negative outcomes are rare, but they do happen. Still, McDonald recommended that the military pursue the Gateway process. Now, I don't want to reveal too much information, but Colonel McDonald is still around. He's in his 80s now and long retired, and as far as I can tell, he never wrote about the Gateway process again. But I'd really love to pick his brain, to see if he really believes in the Gateway process, to see if he's actually tried it, and if he did, what did he see? I'd like to ask him if he fears death, as many of us do, or if he's eager to rejoin the Absolute and contribute his experience to our collective consciousness. And as he nears the end of his time in this world, does knowledge of the next world give him peace? I'd like him to tell me that he's been to the other side and there's nothing to be afraid of, that the Gateway process is true. Our consciousness is infinite, and when we die, our energy returns to the Absolute. Now, I'm not religious, but this sounds a lot like heaven and God. Now, maybe not a man in the sky with a boomy voice and a white beard, but God in the sense that we all come from the same source. So in a way, the Gateway process could prove the existence of God or the afterlife. But people of faith don't need proof. But scientists have no use for God. They want evidence. They want scientifically provable truth. So as you're watching this right now, you might lean more toward science or more toward God. But wouldn't it be amazing if they're actually the same thing?
Well, I hope that gave some clarity on the Gateway process. I'm confused as fuck, but I did grasp some of it, but this is definitely something I would have to rewatch a few times to really comprehend. But yeah, I thought they were pretty good videos. So yeah, give me some feedback on this. What do you think of it? Like, I can't really say much right now because I'm still processing all this, but I feel it's very valuable information. That hemisync, where you listen to the frequencies, that might be something I might want to check out. But yeah, so give me your feedback. What's your opinion on it? Let me know. Help me out. Let us all grow together and learn together. And we'll see you next time, Under the Influence. Take care.